Hi, my name is Espen Lesh, and I'm an artist with a specialty in digital illustration. I've been at it for a while now, and like most artists, I had my fair share of ups and downs trying to find my style, fighting through creative ruts, all of that stuff. Today, I want to share with you an idea that has helped me to keep going and keep growing as an artist. And it comes from something that Bruce Lee and my old art teacher used to say: be like water. It's simple, but it can change how you approach your art and the way that you handle the tough parts of the process. And before we begin, I just want to say that this isn't like an ultimate truth or a step-by-step guide to art. I don't have all the answers, but what it is that I'm sharing today is a way of thinking that has helped me in my own art, and maybe it will give you something useful for yours too. And with all that out of the way, let's begin. Somewhere on Earth, in a small village in the middle of nowhere, in the cold and rainy darkness of Jutland, lay a house with a light in the basement. And here was a boy by the name of Espen, and he looked something like this. He was born into a loving family and was the younger of two. Espen loved to draw, so much in fact that he often dreamt himself away from his everyday life. He wasn't a standout student by any means, in fact, average at best. But while others followed the lessons, Espen would sit quietly doodling on the edges of his schoolwork. Drawing was an escape from the small town and the mundane, a place to explore one's imagination. And back then, there was no worry about structure or technique, it was just about having fun. And another creative outlet became live role-playing. Here he learned to improvise and social collaboration and to build his own outfits and weapons. And with the rise of the computer and the internet, Espen was sucked into the world of Warcraft, Dota, and Warhammer. This created fond memories of gaming 3 days straight with friends and eating chips and sleeping only for a very few hours. And as he grew older, the big questions started to come ever so close. I considered many paths: acting, musician, and even garbage man. I heard it was good money, there's fresh air, at least partly, and you were off early meant that you could have most of your days off. My life were to forever change when my biology teacher handed me a flyer to a summer camp where you could learn to make computer games over 7 days. I went, and it became 4 years in total. 2 years as a participant and 2 years as a volunteer teacher. And this was around the time where my life were to take an unforeseen turn. I lost my brother when I was 18, and it was a shock and something that really changed everything. And at that age, it felt more like a curse than anything else. But in time, I came to see it differently. I internalized a lot of the emotions around his death, not fully understanding how to process such a loss. And it would be something that I had and still have to face here later in life. But even as I suppressed those feelings, I took something valuable from the experience. A lesson that many don't learn until much later in life, and that is not to take your time for granted. It was around this time that I chose that I wanted to become an artist. Which kind? Initially, I thought it was going to be 3D modeling. My dad, who himself was a mechanic, told me that if this was the path, then I should give it my all. So I heard that there was this place called the Animation Workshop. It was a great school for creatives and a place where like-minded people came to hone their skills. And there were two paths. One was to become an animator, and the other one was to become a 3D generalist. The selection process was hard. There were hundreds of people applying and only 20 seats. I gathered my best pieces, which mostly consisted of learning photo manipulation in Photoshop, some kick-ass character designs, and a character illustration all shaded in Burn and Dodge tool. I sent off my application and I waited eagerly to receive my letter in March to hear if I was accepted. And the wait was excruciating, but finally the letter came in the door. I opened it and I saw that I got declined. And a weight fell to my stomach, and it was another year before I could apply again. Another year of figuring out what to do. So yeah, I was licking my wounds and I got started to work on a new portfolio. This meant that I needed to improve my skills. And this is where I met someone. Let me introduce you to the poet. The poet represents the raw, untamed side of creativity. He is drawn and driven by emotion, imagination, and vision, always dreaming up new, bold ideas and pushing boundaries. The poet thrives on spontaneity and creating in bursts of inspiration, unafraid to defy convention. He brings depth and meaning through storytelling, infusing art with the rich emotions and abstract ideas. But when the poet leans too far, he can become overly self-indulgent, losing sight of discipline and practicality. This is where our next one comes in. Here's the builder. He's the disciplined one, the methodical side of creativity. He strives on structure, craftsmanship, and technical mastery, ensuring that every idea is executed with precision and focus. The builder values process and problem solving, bringing order to chaos, and making sure that projects gets finished. But when he leans too far, the builder can become rigid, overly focused on perfection and dismissive of the emotional and spontaneous elements that gives art its soul. And here I was, in between these two forces that was often in conflict. The poet thrives in chaos, seeking freedom and emotion, while the builder craving structure and precision. The poet wanting to dive into wild ideas without a plan, but the builder insisting on sticking to a method. And the conflict really arose when the poet's desire for spontaneity clashed with the builder's need for control. Too much freedom, nothing gets finished, and too much structure, and the work loses its soul. There's no doubt that I felt the poet was my main mode and the one that came very natural to me. And alongside my journey here as an artist, and as we go deeper into the story, I would love to introduce to you some people inside of me, perhaps even inside of you. And this is where I want to introduce to you the first of the one. This guy, he's the creator, the chaotic dreamer. And maybe you'll hear him saying, "Oh, there's just so much I want to do. I can't decide what to focus on." He gets stuck in the fog of too many ideas that often turns into procrastination, unsure of which path to take, so he takes none. And then you find them being resistant to feedback and criticism. For example, saying, "Why would I change it? This is how I felt when I created it." They can become defensive if someone suggests adding more structure or refinement to their work, and they might even just say, "It's just my style." The chaotic dreamer lives in a world of raw emotion and ideas. They're constantly struck by inspiration and a close friend to the poet indeed. Chasing sparks, sketching wildly, pouring feeling into every piece. But their work never reaches the finish line. Structure feels limiting and discipline feels like betrayal. They believe that the magic lives in the moment, and once that moment fades, they move on. The result? A portfolio full of bold, beautiful starts, but few pieces that fully realize their potential. The chaotic dreamer is afraid that polishing their work will kill its spirit. And to grow, the chaotic dreamer must keep the poet's fire, but learn to invite the builder's patience. And the goal isn't to tame the emotion, but to shape it. They'll learn that finishing isn't the end of the magic, but it's how the magic becomes visible to others. And the first months went by, and I was still working on that portfolio, and it was clear that I needed some help. I looked online and I found that there was this place called the Drawing Academy, and it was a 6-month classical drawing course where you would learn to draw from observation. And ironically, it was right next to the animation workshop, the school that I just got rejected by. So I applied and I got accepted. There was no application process really. You just had to pay them some money, but it sure sounds good, doesn't it? So things were going great, you know. I was trying to be like my Russian art teacher, Artem, and he was good at drawing and I wanted to be good too. And in many ways, I tried to learn from him so I could hopefully become a bit like him, at least the drawing part. So here I was drawing, desperately wanting his approval. And for the first couple of months, he would not really pay much attention to my work. He would look noddingly and walk away. But then one day, Artem came up to me and pointed at my drawing and simply said, "Be like water," and then walked away. Be like water? What on earth do you mean by that? How does water have anything to do with art and what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to draw here, and can you just be helpful and tell me how to do it? And, you know, but just like that, the seed of that comment was planted, and a question that would linger and haunt me for years to come, eventually leading to this very presentation. And this really sent me hurling into meeting our next person. I would look at Artem's work and I would think, that's what I need to be doing. And then I would see someone else online and I would feel pulled in an entirely new direction. Every time something inspired me, I would pivot. Start fresh to try to catch that spark. I was chasing my voice, but in the process, I kept restarting, redirecting, and losing momentum. And that's the fragmented artist. And it really is too many signals at once. And the shift started to come when I stopped to react to everything around me, and I started to listen to what was resonating with my own work. That's where the focus started to begin, not by cutting off inspiration, but by choosing what truly belongs to you. And the growth for the fragmented artist begins when they stop switching chaotically between the poet and the builder. You need the poet's trust in your own inner voice to stay with an idea long enough to understand it. And you need the builder's discipline to commit and follow through, to shape that idea into something real. When the two are balanced, the fragmented artist becomes focused, self-guided, and authentic again. So the months flew by and my observation skills had improved drastically. I had adopted the cross-hatching technique from my teacher, but I was still fairly confused on the inside. And my drawings from imaginations, there's still ways to go. I was still trying to find my voice. And the year had passed and it was time again to apply for the school. So I gathered my best pieces, different techniques of figure drawing and storyboard and character design, personal pieces and environment paintings, even clay sculpting, 3D and graffiti. And I was accepted this time. And to say that I was ecstatic would have been an understatement. I was so happy this day. Now it was time to become a better modeler. This was the time in my journey where everything looked right to me, but nothing felt alive. It looked good, I checked it from all the angles, but it just felt hollow. So I was learning 3D modeling and mastering tools and solving technical challenges, but the result, it was polished, but it felt hollow. And this is where our next artist comes through. The soulless technician is an artist who builds with precision but forgets to feel. They can recreate anything but often forget why that they're creating at all. Their work is controlled, clean, impressive even, but it doesn't move you. It doesn't carry a soul. You might have heard them say, I just need to get the technique right. And to grow, the soulless technician must invite the poet back into the process. Not abandon the craft, but to reconnect with why they create. They already have the builder's strength, discipline, control, execution, but it's the poet's emotion and meaning that brings the spark. And when you blend the two, the technician becomes something more. An artist who doesn't just build beautiful things, but make people feel. And it was first when I was coming back to the modeling in clay, that something started to click. It was the liveliness of the clay, the imperfect surface that instantly brought life with it. I had a fun idea of merging a crocodile and a duck, and so the crocoduck was born. And the imperfections made me loosen up, and my 3D modeling skills grew. Getting into the school did not mean that it was just some magic pill that you would take and come out on the other end an awesome artist. It was up to you to push when you find the things that interested you. So school was a place that would introduce you to many different subjects, and it was your job then to find the ones that resonated and dig deeper into them. First, I thought I was going to be a modeler, that this was my path. But after the first year of school, I found myself much more drawn to concept art. I'd gotten better at drawing, and doing character designs was something started to pop out. Something started to become evidently clear. I was much more drawn to making it look pretty. I loved rendering, getting the feel of the materials right, capturing the color and light, and defining form. And even though I could do concept art, I had to confront the reality that I had a passion and natural inclination that was pulling me more towards illustration, at least for now. Creating full illustrations felt like being the director, the writer, the stage designer, lighting crew, cameraman, all at once, but for one perfectly manageable frame. I had control over every element, and I loved weaving it all together, especially when it came to storytelling through illustration. And it was something I felt good at. Some days, of course, more than others, and it became an outlet for me where I could express emotions that at the time I struggled to put into words. And I found that over the years, I would find myself in periods of flow, feeling like I was finally striking a balance, and other days, though, that I couldn't even recreate what I'd done before. And those days were filled with dread and frustration. And I would worry that maybe I had lost it all, sometimes leading to periods of inactivity. And this is where a stranger starts to appear from the distance. The paralyzed artist knows about the poet, and they know about the builder, and that knowledge becomes a trap. They overthink every decision, afraid of being too loose or too rigid. Every brushstrokes becomes a debate, and every idea a battleground between freedom and control, so they stall. They rewrite, they redraw, they reconsider, and in the end, nothing moves. And that's the weight of expectation, crushing the instinct to just begin. You might have heard them mention writer's block. To grow, the paralyzed artist must learn to trust motion over perfection. And like water in a stream, creativity needs to keep flowing. If it stops, it becomes stagnant, losing its freshness and energy. And the poet's spontaneity helps them break this dam, letting the ideas flow freely. The builder's patience guides the current, shaping and directing the energy again. So process happens when they allow themselves to begin imperfectly. Trusting the clarity and refinement comes through continued motion and movement and not stalled hesitation. Once they embrace this flow, the paralyzed artist breaks free, finds rhythm, and begins to create again. And most of my days in school looked a bit like this. We'd have to school, we'd go to the gym, home and eat, and in the evenings we would use this on personal work, learning to do illustration and concept art in that sense, because most of the days at school was learning 3D work and rigging and all kinds of stuff that I wasn't particularly very interested in. So being in this relaxed state and slightly tired by the end of the day helped me loosen up and flow out of this analysis paralysis. It's a basic rhythm, but it was essential for me to get out of my head and more into my body. So I would get back and the last year of school really just flew by, and all of a sudden, the daunting next step loomed around the corner. Applying for studios and trying to take the first leap into the industry. And most of these pieces were hours of evenings, and some of them were hours of schoolwork as well. The mission of mine was to show that I could do a wide variety. My aim was not to be recognized by style, but to be adaptable, to fit into several studios or projects. Style was seen as a tool to communicate feelings with, and my portfolio was online, and in my About section, I shared that my long-term goal was, and always has been, a goal of mine, was to share the knowledge that I will find along the way, which is what I'm doing now. I sent this portfolio and this website out to many different studios around the world. In total, 63 applications were sent. And I got 2 options back and chose to go with the 6 More Vodka studio, an outsourcing studio in Berlin. And I packed my bags and moved to Berlin to join the mega skilled team there. And this was my room when I first moved in. And it, I probably looked like a lunatic with all those notes about painting and drawing taped up on the wall. And after several months of interning, I finally got hired as a junior concept artist. I had to adjust to their way of working. It was much more methodical and clean than what I've been used to. Most pieces were done in collaboration, and very few were made by a single artist. And this is where I started to turn into the overplanner. And I would hear them say, if I follow all the steps perfectly, the art will be great. But their pieces often lack spontaneity or risk-taking, sticking to safe formulas. Because perfection comes at a cost. The art feels cold, lacking a heartbeat that connects with people, a spotless kitchen with no cooking happening inside. That's the risk of the old overplanner, getting so caught up in control that creativity and emotion get squeezed out. And to grow, the overplanner needs to invite the poet back into the process. They already have the builder's discipline and mastery, which is a solid foundation. But the poet's emotional spontaneity brings warmth and life. And it's about losing the grip on control, just enough to let feeling shine through in perfection. When structure meets soul and the overplanner's work starts to transform from perfect to powerful, from precise to profound. And coming out of that overplanner mindset, a big turning point for me was when 6 More Vodka started to work with Riot Games. I was surrounded by incredible mentors, Gerald Peral, Marco and Jelena Djordjevic, and Michal Ivan, people and artists that I've looked up to for years. And each of them had a mastery of their own, whether it was shape design, lighting, storytelling, or polish. I was really standing on the shoulder of giants. And these weren't solo pieces, they were built as teams. Every splash was a collaboration between several artists taking care of different parts of the same image. Passing the baton, shaping the baton, turned a bit French there, and sharpening the work together. That experience reshaped how I thought about art, but not just in terms of execution, but also in terms of trust and feedback and shared vision. I had a knack for color and light. That's where I was used the most. Drawing and design and perspective were my weaknesses. But once in a while, I was able to push those weak spots too. And this was a collaboration, but I got to draw the composition in the moment for the photo herder and got to paint the majority on it. So most of the time though, I would really just function as the rendering guy, often being given a tight line art by somebody who was way better at that. But then something unexpected happened. A weird savior coming in from the side. Blitzcrank, this dude. What was gonna happen there? Yeah, we had a picture coming in and we had to do a splash for Blitzcrank. So Gerald and I made some sketches and some thumbnails, and we sent it over to Riot, and they ended up picking one of mine to move forward with. And Marco told me that I could take it all the way to final. All me, a chance to show that I could stand on my own legs. Of course, he would check in along the way, making sure that if I started to struggle or spin, others would step in to assist. But this was my shot, and I was not going to throw away my shot. So I started doing a clinical, tight line drawing out of the figure, as detailed as I could, and leaving no stone unturned. I had to design and think about how I made that weird dude called Blitzcrank as cool as I possibly could, because he looked derpy. So no guesswork there. I was not going to half-ass this or fail it. I put my head to the paper and tried to do my very best. The next steps were the things that I spent a lot of time in my internship on, which was preparing the masking and preparing for rendering. Next, the color and rendering madness ensued, and I was locked in, spending weeks on making this as believable as I could muster. And I had taken it as far as I could, and I was exhausted but proud, and the people at Riot loved it. It was sent to the talented Splash team to wrap it up, and you can kind of see here the before and after, and this is what it came into the game like. They added some great pops of color and made the chain much better. But this was really a pivotal moment for me. I had worked myself so hard and neglected many parts of my life that was not, becoming better at drawing and painting. That was the singular target that I was aiming at. And therefore, after having spent a bit over a year and a half working at Six More Vodka, I fell into a deep depression in Berlin. I had pushed myself so hard at work and not prioritizing my life outside that everything outside had really disappeared. And my long distance relationship that was nearing its 5th year was in shambles as well. I had made the decision that I was going to move back to Denmark, back to friends, back to family, and in an effort to salvage both my relationship and sense of balance. We couldn't fix the relationship, and we eventually broke up. And I was about 24, about to be 25, and I had never left the EU. My first flight, in fact, had been at 21. I had made the choice that I'll take a 2-month trip to Nepal and Tibet. And part of that would be an 18-day trek from Jiri to Everest Base Camp. And it wasn't about getting to base camp. I needed some peace and clarity in the middle of everything falling apart. I needed a new perspective and to get away from screens and to see the world from a different angle. And after the 2 months, I came back to Denmark and I moved into a little 9 square meter room, and the box that you see over here, well, that was our kitchen and that box was our shower. I would make a little list of the qualities that I would inspire to embody. Remember myself that every time that I would step out the door, what I would like to be like. I did not have a lot, but life was good. I helped kickstart an outsourcing studio called Artwork together with a friend, and my craft was growing bit by bit, experimenting with styles, color, and subjects. And here's a small selection of work that was done around that time. Honing in on that balance between the raw creativity and technical precision was the breakthrough that launched my career. And early on, I leaned heavily into the poet side, full of ideas, emotions, and endless imagination. But what I lacked was structure and discipline, and it wasn't until I started to embrace the builder, learning the importance of technique and refining my craft, that things started to change. Riot had reached out and wanted to hear if I was interested in working with them directly. It was a yes, of course. And after a 12-hour flight and 6 hours of interviews, they decided that I was fit for the position of splash artist. And in LA, working as a splash artist, each project demanded that perfect blend. emotion to make the art compelling, and technique to make it professional. This harmony was really key to that success. I had to go through a laborious immigration process, but after 8 months, I had my visa in my hands and I was ready to take the flight to the States. Working alongside some of the best digital illustrators in the world was nothing short of incredible. It was both inspiring and humbling to collaborate with such talented artists, constantly learning from their mastery and dedication. And every day I felt like it was an opportunity to grow, surrounded by people who pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the world of digital art. And here are some of those pieces that was created during that time. Everything from cute characters to alluring succubuses, to demon hunters and Sailor Moon lineup, romance to the big boom of Valentine's. Yes, the themes were many. And the flavors were many too, but over the time, as my craftsmanship improved, I began to feel comfortable with the technical side of art. Each piece became more polished, more precise, but as I refined my skills, something unexpected happened. I started to feel like something was missing. It was a bit like a musician playing the same track over and over and over again. Sure, the technical mastery was there, but the work looked impressive, but it really started to feel repetitive. The art was technically sound, yet I was searching for something new and challenging. Something that connected more deeply with myself. And then a game-changing project landed on my table, creating and illustrating a pre-season piece. It involved an enormous cast of characters, intricate storytelling, hidden Easter eggs, and somehow making it all fit together in a massive cohesive puzzle. It was a challenge on every level, pushing my skills to the limit while requiring both creativity and precision to bring everything into a unified whole. This project reignited my passion for illustration. It reminded me of why I fell in love with the craft in the first place. The storytelling, the details, the challenge of bringing so many elements together. It was exactly the spark that I needed to reconnect with my creative drive again. Mark and Brandon, the founders of Riot Games, each had a chance to design their very own hero. This is how Tryndamere and Rice were born. And I decided to have them look down at it all, standing strongly together in their friendship. And it was awesome to be able to bring them a bit of joy with this. And with a newfound spark, I decided that I wanted to try to learn something new. I wanted to learn the style of J.C. Leyendecker. I believed that that was the perfect fusion of structure and chaos of the poet and the builder, both working in perfect harmony. But I couldn't find the right balance. I could not achieve what he had done. No matter how hard I tried, it didn't click, deleting many attempts in frustration. The edges weren't right, the paint felt muddy, and eventually I started thinking, maybe this style is just not possible to do in digital. Maybe, I can do all these big fancy illustrations, but why can't I learn this? Maybe I'm not good enough, started also to dawn in my mind. And that's the core of our next person, the disillusioned idealist. They believe in a beautiful vision, but they get discouraged when it doesn't all come together quickly. They romanticize the balance, but they don't and haven't yet accepted the reality that balance only comes with time, miss, and iteration. And so they begin to doubt their talent, their path, and sometimes they give up too soon. Personally, I had to let go of my ego and past achievements. I was learning something new, and not being good at it immediately led to disencouragement. I needed to learn that balance isn't a fixed destination, it's a practice, constantly in need of adjusting. And it was first when I allowed myself to fail again and to begin again and to be a beginner again that I really started to grow. And yes, I could do splash art well, but this was a completely different beast. I did many master studies and eventually things started to flow. From studies to being able to do pieces in the style of him, some more successful than others, to eventually work together with Proco to release a YouTube video going through the process of how this was done, giving their knowledge away for free. But after 5 years of living in Los Angeles, I decided that it was time to head home to Denmark. I wanted to be closer to family and to be able to have more time with my parents as they were getting older. I also knew that we don't know how much time we would have left together, and thinking about that became a higher priority than keep making splashes in that sense. So I shipped my things on a pallet and flew back to Denmark. I had made an agreement with the Legends of Runeterra team that I could work for them remotely as an art lead, and I would have something to do when I got back. And at the same time, I had met somebody truly special, Jackie. We had talked about the idea of moving together, and that was now becoming real. I would head back to Denmark first to get settled, and she would follow once I had my footing. We planned to do a long distance relationship for about 6 months, but the truth was that we did not know how long we were going to be apart, and it was a leap of faith for both of us. It had been about 7 years being immersed in the League of Legends universe, and I had found myself now back in my parents' basement. I had heard nothing back from the team of Runeterra, and after 2 weeks, I had gotten a call from the producer telling me that the plans were cancelled, the budget got cut. Gutted, angry, and sad, I cancelled all plans about moving to Copenhagen until I had figured something else out. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It gave me time to reconnect with my parents and to not have any expenses. It gave me time to rediscover the artist that I once was. But leaving behind the glamour and prestige of Riot in Los Angeles for the quiet parents' basement in Jutland, Denmark was jarring. Returning to my childhood room where my artistic journey began felt like stepping back in time, a stark contrast to the high-profile world I had left behind. The transition was surreal. I went from feeling like a prominent figure in a bustling metropolis to an artist jobless in their parents' basement. And the room that had once cradled my early dreams now felt both familiar and foreign. It was a humbling return to basics, a chance to reconnect with my roots. I bought a PC and had none of my belongings because my stuff turned out to be delayed and stuck in different harbors for 6 months. Similarly, I told Jackie that I would need to have some sort of stability before she moved with me. And here I started to improve my ability to draw faces, knowing that the only way to get better at it was really through practice. I had done faces before, but it was always a struggle, and since making pictures, that is one of the key parts you will always look at, this became an area of focus and practice again. So I committed to drawing countless faces, focusing on capturing different expressions and angles and features. Each sketch helped me refine my skills and understand the major decisions that brings a face to life. And it was a lot of trial and error. And eventually, bit by bit, things started to become a bit easier. This ended up becoming a comfort zone and eventually also a place to play. I experimented with painting more with textures, trying something that felt less digital than the splash art I had done in the past, and having fun with some darker flavors as well. And trying out and learning new styles continued. The Valorant one was fun because it was so shape-focused, much like the Line Dicker one. Hell, I even returned back to my roots of 3D to work and to see how this could aid me in illustration. And yes, it was not Maya like it was back in the day, but Blender was so much better and many of the principles were the same. And this became the final piece that I named Matriarch. And it had been 6 months of sitting in the in the basement waiting and figuring out what was next when Riot reached out and offered a 6-month freelance contract working with them on the Wild Rift team and the MMO team. And at the end of those 6 months, they offered an extended contract for another year. But IO Interactive decided to slide into my DMs and wanted to show me what they were working on. I gave it a look, and after a lot of consideration, and also Jackie giving me a bit of a push to try something new, I ended up saying yes and entered the new role of art director for Project Fantasy. And this is where I am today. And after a year of meaningful quality time with my parents, Jackie and I eventually settled in Copenhagen. We got married and we started a new chapter together. But as I look back at my time in the basement, I understood that there was something that started to realign again. And I want to share that through a story. And particularly, I want to share that using the power of the poet. So let's dive into it. One day, like many others, Espen sat in front of the blank canvas. The paintbrush loosely clutched in his hand. The room around him was a chaotic mess of half-finished works, spilled paint, and scattered brushes. He let out a deep sigh, staring at the emptiness of the page before him. Today, like every day, he felt the same tug of war raging inside of him, the poet and the builder pulling him in two directions. Why are you even thinking about it? The poet's voice whispered in his mind, slippery and wild. Just feel it. Let it flow out of you. Don't worry about making it perfect. Art is an expression, not precision. Espen leaned in slightly, the idea tempting. He could already picture the swirling colors, shapes with no forms, and just emotions bleeding across the canvas. But as soon as his brush hovered over the surface, the builder interrupted. "Wait! Stop!" came the cold, steady voice of the builder. "Do you even know what you're doing? Where's the plan? You can't just throw paint and call it art. You need structure, balance, a composition. We need rules here." Espen groaned and dropped the brush onto the table with a clatter. This is how every session started. His mind caught between the wild emotional energy of the poet and the methodical, process-driven guidance of the builder, each voice pulling in a different direction, leaving him paralyzed at the midpoint. He stood up, pacing the studio. The poet laughed, amused at his struggle. "Why do you even listen to him? You're an artist, Espen. A rebel. And art is freedom. Forget the lines, forget the rules. You're not building a house. You're giving birth to something alive. Close your eyes, feel the colors in your hands, and let them speak." Espen hesitated, his heart beating faster. He liked the idea. He liked the thought of just diving in. But before he could make a move, the builder's voice cut in, sharp and critical. "If you follow his advice, you'll end up with another mess. Look at the paintings around you. None of them are finished. They're half ideas, fragments of chaos. You need structure, discipline, and that's how you make good art. Follow a plan and stick to it." Espen's eyes flickered to the pile of canvases in the corner, each abandoned halfway through. He winced. The builder wasn't wrong. All of them were filled with passion, sure, but none of them felt complete. "But they're alive," the poet protested, his voice rising. "Each stroke is filled with feeling. It's real art. It's beautiful because it's messy." "Beautiful," the builder scoffed. "It's unfinished. An idea isn't art until it's brought to life with form and craft. And you can't just leave everything in chaos." Espen's mind spun, the two voices growing ever louder. He wanted to feel free, like the poet said, but he also wanted the satisfaction of seeing something through like the builder demanded. He stared at the canvas again, his hands twitching, his mind, thoughts battling for control. And then, for the first time, he paused. He took a deep breath and looked at both sides of himself. The poet and the builder started to wonder, If maybe there aren't enemies after all. Maybe they're just confused allies speaking different languages. Maybe what he needed wasn't to choose between them, but to make them work together. Espen sat down, picked up his pencil again, this time with purpose. He touched the paper, letting the poet guide his hand in the beginning. The first stroke was loose, flowing, a swirl of deep red curving across the canvas. And the poet hummed, approvingly in his mind, pleased with the freedom. But then Espen paused, grounding himself again. He took a step back and let the builder take a closer look at the composition. What could the structure be? How could he use the chaos of the poet's creation and shape it into something more? He thought carefully about balance and how the lines could lead the eye, and how forms might interact. The brush moved again, but this time more controlled, without losing the energy of the initial strokes. Espen could feel the push and pull inside of him, but instead of letting it freeze him, he flowed between the two voices, blending them. He smiled, lost in the process now, and as he worked, he let the poet and the builder speak. But he no longer let them drown each other out. They were both part of him, both necessary. And the hours started to pass, and for the first time when he stepped back, the painting didn't feel like chaos. It wasn't just raw emotion, but it was also something that wasn't cold and mechanical either. It was something in between, something alive, yet complete. And Espen stared at the finished piece, his heart swelling with pride. The poet hummed with satisfaction, and the builder nodded in quiet approval. And then, for the first time, Espen felt like an artist, one who knew how to listen to both halves of himself. And here we are at the last artist, last but not least. The harmonized creator has found their rhythm, dancing between intuition and structure, emotion and technique. They no longer create to prove something, they create to feel something. It's a return to the way that we made art as children, with curiosity and playfulness and wonder, getting lost in flow, not chasing approval, not trapped by perfection, but exploring and discovering and responding to the page. The difference now? They have the tools to shape that energy and give it clarity and direction and weight. So the joy that started inside of them can move outwards and truly reach others. But what makes this harmony real isn't that everything goes smoothly. It is that it's a messy process, and you learn to roll with the punches. You learn to shift gears, and when things go wrong, you gotta trust that every problem on the canvas is an invitation to grow. This is the artist who plays, but now with purpose. Free yet grounded, resilient yet open. An adult kid creating again. And in case you missed them, I wanted to give you another overview of the artists that we met. None of these are bad, but a part of growing and a part of learning, and most of all, a part of being a human being. You're not alone in experiencing these patterns, and you can ask yourself, am I more of a poet or am I more of the builder? It's not to change yourself in that sense, but to look at your opposite and see, how can I learn from the other one? Because there is no one-size-fits-all formula. There is no master kung fu, no right way, no magical brush, and no master secret. It's just you and the work that needs to be done. And there are many blends of art and components that can be surprising, fresh and new, and everyone's balance looks differently. So for one person, it might mean adding a bit more structure to their wild ideas, while for someone else, it might mean loosening up and allowing for more experimentation. There is no reaching a perfect balance, but finding harmony that feels right to you. The creative journey is ongoing, and everyone's process will evolve over time. So as we're closing off, stay true to who you are, while acknowledging your areas of growth. rather than striving for some impossible ideal. These archetypes can be tools to find your own version of creative harmony. Embrace your strengths while also explore the components that could make you work even more fulfilling and effective. That's really it. It's about unity, not uniformity. Mastery is not about choosing between chaos and order, but in learning how to let them dance. So, like water, you adapt, you flow, and you create. So be like water, my friend. Thank you for taking the time to go through this entire talk. Really appreciate it. If you're interested to find all the archetypes and the descriptions that you will find here, there's a QR code that you can scan. I will add a link in the description below as well too. And if you found this presentation useful, please feel free to share the video. It means a lot to me and it helps a lot. So yeah, with that, thank you for your time. I'm signing off. Have a good day. Bye.